Thanks, Michelle. Ecuador has struggled to leave its natural resources untouched, even while 27% of its population lives in poverty. Deep in the Amazon jungle, the Yasuni area is now open for oil exploration. President Rafael Correa says his people need financial investment and a healthy environment, and his government has a new plan to balance conservation with exploitation. Michelle Begay has more.
It was a tense debate that stirred passion. Would Ecuador open up part of the Amazon rainforest to oil drilling? The Ecuadorian government attempted to protect the Yasuni area of the Amazon basin by launching an initiative in 2007 where international countries would have paid Ecuador to refrain indefinitely from extracting the nearly 850 million barrels worth of oil reserves. In the end, Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa had to admit the initiative's failure.
With profound sadness, but also with the absolute responsibility towards our people and our history, I've had to make one of the most difficult decisions of my presidency. Today, I have signed the executive decree for the liquidation of the Yasun, and thus end the initiative.
For many here, drilling in the rainforest brings back memories of disaster. Between 1964 and 1992, an oil field in northeastern Ecuador, operated by Texaco, caused environmental contamination. To this day, the oil spill runs through the minds of all Ecuadorians. Essentially, President Correa is in a difficult position. Internationally, he projects himself as an environmentalist, fighting to conserve Ecuador's rich biodiversity. But he must also deal with the fact that his high public spending on social programs is financed by the country's main economic driver, the oil sector. President Correa said the drilling in the Yasuni National Park will be conducted in less than 1% of the area. His administration insists that the reserves that are valued at $18 billion would help him continue to cut poverty.
We understand the concerns of not only the ecologists, but also future generations to conserve, but also there is a need for economic resources.
Assembly member and vice president of the Commission of Biodiversity, Pamela Falconi, explains this exploration is different than any other, as it's on government terms.
We decided to open up the exploration of 2 blocks where we make sure it will be done by a public company, the state, but with the transfer of knowledge. The closest people we're working with are Chinese companies that have the economic and technological capabilities to present themselves as partners to work in these oil blocks.
Polls show Ecuadorians are evenly split about developing the field, and the opposition has said they want a referendum on the issue. But the government insists that being green and using oil reserves can go hand in hand.
We have to be very responsible in protecting the environment, but we are also the 5th nation in the world who receives the most income from the oil industry, and we have changed our hydrocarbon policy so it can represent a real opportunity in development.
That change in policy referred to by the vice president is the government's 2010 decision to change production sharing agreements. Oil investors had to sign less profitable service contracts or leave the country. René Ortiz, a former Ecuadorian energy minister and secretary general of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, says Ecuador may continue steady production at 500,000 barrels a day, but these new contracts will be detrimental in the long run. He says private companies have no incentives to invest, and Ecuador has no money of its own to put into exploration.
When you are addressing exploration, there's no barrel produced. And you create an expectation which is too far away, as I just said. And it doesn't attract.
In October, President Correa went on a European tour that included Russia. The Kremlin announced Russian state energy giants Gazprom and Rosneft were in talks with Ecuador over plans to develop the country's hydrocarbon resources. These types of international collaborations is what Vice President Jorge Glass says is evidence enough of participation of the private sector in Ecuador.
An example of this has been our complex search for a new investment partner at the Pacific refinery. We are already negotiating an alliance that goes beyond the refinery with a Chinese company, one of the most important, the CPC, that is already investing in Ecuador.
But the vice president doesn't just have his eye on oil exploits. He is also in charge of bringing Ecuador into a new age that leaves behind raw materials.
We are very conscious that the oil will not be around forever, so we have proposed a model of industrialization. This means a policy that uses the non-renewable resources to generate an economy less dependent and independent of the non-renewable resources.
It's a delicate and large task for the developing nation, and only time will tell if being green, exporting raw materials, and moving towards industrialization can all take place at the same time. Michelle Vega, CCTV, Quito, Ecuador.